All right, Mel, I think we should be good to go.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get going here then. All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is our monthly meeting of the Wednesday, February 24th, 2021 of the City of Des Moines Zoning Board of Adjustment. This board has the power under Iowa law and the zoning ordinance of the City of Des Moines to hear and make decisions on requests for variances and exceptions from the regulations in the zoning ordinance, conditional use permit requests, and to consider appeals from any decision of city staff in the administration of the zoning ordinance. I'm just going to take a couple minutes here. I'll introduce our board. I'm doing this part with our video camera, but then I'll go ahead and turn that off so we can save bandwidth for everybody on their connection speeds here. I'll introduce our board members. They're citizens of the City of Des Moines. They have been appointed to the board by the City Council. The board members are volunteers and they receive no compensation for their public service. I'll go ahead and introduce our board members. They are Nathan Blake, Cindy Smith, Marlis Jones, Lynn Carlson, Dave Gare, Justin Gross, and again, I'm Mel Pins, the board chair. I'll also introduce our city staff who may be assisting us today. Legal counsel for the Zoning Board of Adjustment is Judy Parks Cruz. Also assisting is Bert Drost, city planner. Eric Lundy, city planner. Jason Van Essen, city planner. Catherine Drehas, city planner. Sue Ann Donovan is the city's zoning enforcement officer. Michael Ludwig is the planning administrator, and Tyler Hall is our meeting moderator. Now I'm going to cover the meeting's procedure for everybody who's participating. For some of you, this may be the first time you're here at the Board of Adjustment. So I'm going to kind of explain how the hearing process will work today and how we make our decisions. But during the actual hearing, we will help everyone through the process. So don't be worried that if this is all new to you. First and foremost, the Board of Adjustment is a quasi-legal board. This hearing will be conducted with the procedures and format as authorized by Iowa law in this city's ordinances. The meeting is open to the public. The meeting is being recorded by both audio and video for a legal record of these proceedings. The board members have each received a copy of the agenda and the staff recommendation. The board is required to base its decision on each item upon the criteria established by law for the type of relief sought by the appellant. The law applicable to each case has been identified in the written staff report. If the facts, as determined by this board, demonstrates that the criteria established by law for granting the relief have been satisfied, then the board must grant the relief. Otherwise, the board must deny the requested relief. Each item will be announced in the order that it appears on the agenda. Items listed on the consent portion of the agenda, which is our first portion of the agenda, are not planned to be individually discussed, and they will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the staff report, unless there's an appellant who does not agree to the conditions recommended by staff, or if there's an individual in the audience or a board member that requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda so that a full discussion on the matter can occur. After an item is announced, city staff will give an overview of the appeal and will present any written comments received prior to the hearing. Then the applicant or the representative of the applicant will be allowed up to 10 minutes to present their appeal. After that, we will move to the public comment portion of the hearing. Anyone wanting to speak in support of, opposition to, or in neutrality of the appeal will be allowed up to 5 minutes each to provide their comments. This will be their one and only opportunity to address the board on the item at hand. If you wish to speak on an item, when the chair calls for public comments on that item, please click the raise hand icon on the participants panel if you're participating via Zoom on the computer. If participating over the phone, press *9. The meeting moderator will then to no call on you. When it is your turn, the meeting moderator will unmute your microphone and acknowledge for you to proceed with your comments. If you're participating over the phone, once you've been recognized, you must press *6 to unmute your phone. Also, please email any documents that you will be using today in your presentation to planning@dmgov.org. That's planning with 2 N's at dmgov.org. if you have not already provided those documents to city staff prior to the hearing. Once all concerned citizens have spoken, the board will then ask any additional questions of city staff. And lastly, the applicant will be given 3 more minutes for a rebuttal or closing comments if they so choose to. All speakers are required to begin their presentation by giving both their name and address of business or residence in the event that you may need to be contacted for legal notices related to the outcome of this appeal. All speakers are requested to remain courteous and to focus their comments only upon those facts that demonstrate whether or not the criteria established by law has been satisfied. Speakers are asked to ensure that they're respectful of time considerations, and if necessary, the board chair will limit further comments by a speaker if they exceed their time limitation. The board will then close any further public comment on the agenda item, and the board will immediately deliberate the request and make a decision on the appeal here today. Please note that it takes at least 4 affirmative votes for any zoning appeal to gain approval. And I believe we have all 7 members present today, but again, it always takes 4 votes to affirm any appeal. If your appeal is approved today, we ask that you wait until at least 1 week from today's hearing. If you'd need to contact the city's Permit and Development Center to obtain any necessary building or sign permits that are related to your appeal. That allows the decision of this board to be documented in the form of a decision and order, which will be provided to you and to city staff. Any appeal that is approved by this board must be implemented, constructed, or otherwise utilized within 2 years of the date of the decision of this board, or such approval shall expire. Finally, the decisions of this board can only be appealed in the Iowa District Court. If you believe you've been harmed by an error made by this board, your only remedy is to seek relief through the court within 30 days of the filing of the board's decision and order. If you believe the zoning regulations applied by this board are wrong, you may petition the city council to change those regulations for future considerations. All material that is written or otherwise used today as part of any presentation is part of the permanent record. You may contact city staff after the hearing if you need a copy of any information that was presented today. Also, we ask that you keep your microphone on mute other than when addressing the board, so as to limit distractions during the hearing while it is in progress. We also ask that you refrain from using any chat or question and answer function as part of the Zoom meeting, as that conference function will not be monitored for response, and use of that function could be construed as an ex parte communication occurring outside of the hearing process, which is not allowed. So that's my introductory comments for today. And as I said, we'll help everybody through our agenda. So I'm going to turn this over to Bert. We'll go back to that consent agenda and review that with everyone. So Bert, turning it back to you.
Sure. Thanks, Mel, members of the board. This is Bert Drost, planner for the city of Des Moines. We do have 2 items on our consent agenda today. These are considered minor in nature, and we did not receive any objections to either of these 2. The first is item number 1 for a temporary storage lot at or in the vicinity of 401 Southeast 4th Street. And then the second is for a conditional use approval at 2101 Dixon Street. So unless any of the board members have concerns about these 2, or if there's anybody in attendance today who would like to speak against either of these 2, staff recommends approval in accordance with the conditions listed in the staff recommendations.
So I'll go ahead and I'll poll the audience here first. So again, as items 1 and 2 are on consent, city staff is recommending approval of these appeals. For one is in the vicinity of 401 Southeast 4th Street. It'd be a temporary use approval by the city of Des Moines itself for variances to paving requirements. The second one is a conditional use approval on the premises would be at 2101 Dixon Street. So is there anybody in the audience listening or participating by Zoom who would object if the board granted these approvals subject to the staff conditions presented? If anybody wants to object us approving items 1 or 2, please hit the raise hand icon in Zoom or hit *9 on your phone. And then we just ask if you're objecting, and then if so, we would go ahead and put this on our regular agenda for full discussion. So anybody in opposition to us granting those from the audience? Any signs, Bert?
I am not seeing any.
Okay, all right. Board members, is there anybody on the board who would have an objection to approving items 1 or 2? If so, please say so. If not, would there be a motion to grant approval for items 1 and 2?
I'll move approval. This is Nathan.
Okay, is there a second?
Marlis will second.
All right, we got a motion by Nathan and a second by Marlis to grant approval for items 1 and 2. So we'll go ahead and take a roll call vote of the board for approval.
Lynn Carlson,
Aye.
Dave Gare,
Aye.
Justin Gross,
Aye.
Marlis Jones,
Aye.
Cindy Smith,
Aye.
Nathan Blake,
Aye.
and Mel Pins.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right, thank you, Tyler. Okay, so that concludes items 1 and 2. If you were here for those items, they have been approved, and you will get a copy of the decision and order within the next week. Okay, that'll bring us now to our discussion portion of the agenda. Our first item up for consideration is a use variance request at 2200 Easton Boulevard, and I'll let staff give us the background on this issue.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Bert Drost, planner for the city of Des Moines. Item number 3 is a request for a use variance at the property at 2200 Easton Boulevard, and it would allow for expansion of the existing commercial use on the property to expand from simply a tire shop to a more general vehicle maintenance and repair business. This property has been before us a few times in recent years, so it might look familiar. So the site's located on the north side of Easton Boulevard, just to the east of the interchange with the freeway. The subject property contains 2 buildings that were historically used for auto dominant types of uses. Here is the application. Again, it's amending from tire shop to add vehicle repair. This is the current conditional use permit the current use variance that is on file for this property. And you can see from the conditions that they're currently allowed to use the property for either an office use or retail use or for a tire repair shop. And as long as the tire repair shop that's there now doesn't cease for a period of 6 months or longer, they still retain this this use variance that allows them to continue to do that. But as I mentioned, they're wanting to expand to include more types of vehicle repair, like the oil changes and minor vehicle maintenance. So here are some photos of the site. Again, there are 2 buildings, and these last photos are more the pictures of the building of the garage that's on the east part of the site. In the staff report, we've detailed the lengthy zoning history of this property. If you read it, you can follow along how they attempted to rezone, were denied under the retired zoning ordinance, and then they were issued a use variance back in 2017, and that was amended in 2018 to how it appears today. They subsequently attempted to amend the use variance again to allow for either auto sales or auto repair, but at that time, the Board of Adjustment denied those requests. So more recently, they attempted to rezone the property from the N3A district to the MX3 district. And in January, the City Council denied that rezoning, which is why they're now back in front of this board requesting a new use variance that would allow for general motor vehicle repair. Also contained in the staff recommendation, you'll find our rationale for why staff has recommended denial. We just feel that this property is too small to be effectively used for vehicle repair. We feel that given its limited size, or it could be a propensity to have outdoor storage or outdoor operation. There's not a lot of space for cars waiting for repairs to be parked. So we just don't feel that this is the proper location for a general vehicle repair business. And we also note that as long as that tire shop doesn't cease for more than 6 months, that the property would retain those rights to have the tire shop use, which staff feels is more appropriate given the size and location of this property. Here are the comment cards. We had one card in support, and then the Accent neighborhood, which represents the land on the south side of Easton Boulevard. We have a card from them saying they're in support as long as there's no cars being sold. And then we did get one card in opposition. And I'll show you the consent map here after I give you a second to read this. So here's the consent map. The card in opposition is right across to the south. So I guess that concludes my presentation. Did the board have any questions for me?
Go ahead, board members. Okay, maybe some folks are thinking on that. Bert, to the best of your knowledge, did the Board of Adjustment grant any exceptions for setbacks or green space or landscaping, or is the site in compliance with those requirements based on the current code?
Originally, the board did grant the paving setback requirement, which was under the zoning code that's been retired. So now under the new code, those landscaping and paving setback requirements are within chapter 135 of the city code, meaning that any appeals to them would have to go to the Plan and Zoning Commission rather than the Board of Adjustment.
Okay, but at this stage of the game, there's no violation per se of standards for the site as is.
No, if you remember when the board originally granted this, they did have to remove some pavement and add some landscaping to meet the retired standards.
Okay, all right.
Hey, Mr. Chair, this is Cindy. Bert, do you know why the city council didn't change the zoning? And was that proposal by the owner of the building that they wanted to get the zoning changed? I kind of remember that, but I can't recall all the details.
Yeah, and they went through that rezoning process back in 2017 when it was zoned R160. At that time, they requested C2 and were denied. And then now with the new zoning ordinance that took effect in 2019, they came in zoned N3A neighborhood district. And that was because the city's land use plan designates this area as low density residential. And so when they applied late last year to the Plan and Zoning Commission to rezone from N3A to a MX3 mixed use district, the Plan and Zoning Commission had recommended denial, and then the City Council went along with that, just based for the similar reasons we don't believe that the auto repair use is appropriate, because it's a very small parcel and it's highly visible right off the freeway. So any negative impacts from a vehicle repair shop would be highly visible and could negatively impact the neighborhood.
Yep. So Bert, kind of a statement and a question related to that. You've mentioned a couple times that in essence, the site's too small to facilitate a vehicle repair shop. And I'm assuming, and I think Cindy might even have alluded to this, that people have got to pull in and out. Cars have to be jockeyed around. Sometimes vehicles come in that are inoperable. So now you've got tow trucks. And basically, while the site might be, quote, too small for a setup there that would be have enough visual setbacks and be appealing, the property itself is not too small for other uses that are allowed, which would include things like office space or having a retail store there or a
Right.
secondhand shop. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So it's not that the property is too small for any use.
Right.
It would be feasible and sizable enough for multiple uses that are allowed in its current zoning district, correct?
Well,
No,
it is zoned single family residential right now. The N3A is more of a neighborhood residential district.
Okay.
So there's no commercial uses allowed by that, but that decision and order I showed you from 2018 does allow the office, retail, and tire
Yep.
repair.
Okay. Yeah. So with the previous decisions, we
Yeah.
have allowed those types of uses for, again, office or retail.
Right.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the previous decision also, is pretty clear that they can't have any outdoor repair or servicing if it's a tire shop, and they can't
Yeah.
have any outdoor storage.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for Bert from the board? Okay. Seeing none. So what happens next in the order of testimony is the applicant gets to present to the board. They need to give their reasoning for their request for the appeal. So that's either the applicant themselves or their representative. They've got up to 10 minutes to present their appeal. So whoever that might be, we'll just need you to give your complete name and address, and then you've got the floor for 10 minutes.
Thank you. This is Zane Blessum. I'm an attorney. My address is 1200 Valley West Drive, Suite 606 in West Des Moines. Miss Angel Groff is the applicant. She's asked me to present this afternoon. So on her behalf, I'd like to thank the board and the members, as well as Mr. Gross, in allowing her this quick presentation. I think the Mr. Gross and his companions have satisfactorily presented to the board all of the facts in regard to this. I would like to highlight that this has always been, probably for at least the last 20 years, a facility for car sales. It's always been an automotive use. I believe that in 2009, Ms. Groff actually purchased it and used it for one of her own car lots. She has two other car lots over on Southeast 14th, and this was a good location. Because of a change in what happened in her own career, she no longer wanted to run the car lot, and we had a tenant come in and run it. They did have a variance at one point. Am I still being heard?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Were granted a variance, and the individual that was running the car lot quit using the car lot, but then indicated he'd like to use it for a tire shop. He went in there, I believe, in roughly 2015, ran it for a short time, and then left Ms. Groff without any continuing rent. This is a limited space. Like I said, it was always automotive. I took a look at the rest of the area in the neighborhood to see if they had any other type of limited minor shops, and I could not find any within a short distance. The application isn't to turn this into some large repair area, but more of a neighborhood repair with minor workings going on, such as putting in batteries, oil changes, and whatnot, because of the limited size that they have there. That's exactly correct. We do understand and appreciate the fact that there's a couple of the neighbors, when they've always been concerned about, and I think it's pretty clear from the three notes that the board received, is that people let it run into disrepair. They don't mow, they don't shovel, they don't clean it up, and they let it run out. And frankly, I was surprised you allowed a tire shop to be in that vicinity because from my past experiences, tire shops have a tendency to leave their tires outside and it gets kind of unsightly. Ms. Groff, and I can have her attest to this, she has attempted for the last year plus to try to get somebody in there to do another tire shop. And she has not met with any success. She has also attempted to find out other tenants for any type of business, office, insurance office, and just hasn't found anybody. And there is some limitations, of course, in putting up a for rent sign. But when she has put up a for rent, she has had repeated requests to do a minor repair shop. And I think if you look at the surrounding neighborhood, even considering the fact that the interstate is close, it would behoove the neighborhood to have such a shop put into it. And by that I mean is there's no really close dealership, there's no close other repair shops that can do minor repairs. And with the exceptions of people who live in the suburbs, a lot of folks don't have easy access to a repair shop, for instance, to get a truck, their car started, jumped, get new batteries, oil change, antifreeze change, and just kind of simple things that are necessary and especially older model vehicles. So if the board would like, I can have her address that. I think there's three things we need to address specifically, and that is the question whether or not there's a reasonable return on the property. And I think I've just described that there's been difficult to get any kind of tenants in there. In fact, the last tenant that did the tire shop has left Ms. Groff short at least 3 or 4 months worth of rent. This property is unique from the standpoint that it's always been used for automotive, and to continue with that on that road would probably actually be a good use of it. And then lastly, I don't think Ms. Groff has ignored what the board's requested, or in fact, city zoning, that she went ahead and did a number of updates with the site plan to be in conformity with what has been requested. So what we're really asking for is a chance to use this facility, this area to the best potential for it. I don't think it'd be a good residential, even though it's in a residential, because of the way it's laid out and built. I don't think it'd be a good use of anything else other than what it was probably 20 plus years ago, and that is a small, minor, for lack of better terms, a ma and pa type of repair shop. And that's what we're asking. And in fact, what we'd even be willing, and I think Ms. Groff would be willing to give us a test at it, a temporary use variance, and allow it to show for the next several months that it can operate that and can be kept in compliance with the neighborhood. I was very pleased to see there was the 3 cards, no cards that came in. People are very concerned about the neighborhood, and rightly so. It's their neighborhood and they like to keep it that way. I don't think the use of a minor repair shop would deviate from that. And so that would be our request today, members. Thank you.
Okay, board members, do we have any questions for Mr. Blessum? Mr. Blessum, I would have kind of a related question topic. I appreciate your discussion from, I don't have a better term here, but just from a conversational perspective about what you'd like to see be allowed here. But from a legal perspective, if you're familiar with this, the Board of Adjustment operates under the zoning ordinance. And a number of years ago, many decades ago, in fact, the zoning for this property and this district was determined and set as what's called R160, so single family residential. And at that time, the business was operating as a car lot, and that's called a non-conforming use. So in essence, you have grandfathering rights. Are you familiar with the term grandfathering rights?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I am.
Okay, so under grandfathering rights, okay, as long as the use remains present and operable, it can stay. So you can't change the zoning ordinance and just kick somebody out. However, I believe your client wanted to expand the operation initially. I think maybe as far back as 2012. And at that time, the board said, well, no, this is a non-conforming use, so we don't want to see further expansions. It's not consistent with the zoning district or the intent of the zoning district, which by and large, this is surrounded by residential property. So the use could have continued as it was, but if I'm correct, we had a period of time for 2.5 years where we did not have a vehicle display lot present. So that use had discontinued. So therefore, we revert back to R1 uses. And that's why she came back to us initially. So the idea of having a car lot here again, it's not consistent with the zoning ordinance. So we tried to give your client every opportunity we could to look at something that would be more reasonable or commensurate in perhaps, comparatively what we would call a neighborhood commercial district. Is there any reason why she has not explored looking at an office operation there? A tax preparer could locate here, an investment guy. It could be a small retailer. Somebody could sell appliances from here, maybe have a service truck in the shop bay. Why does this have to hinge on auto repair? What's the deal?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason for that is that she has put out notices to rent it. And I think and I don't have any copies to provide the board, I apologize, but it's been a general advertisement to say, come and rent this facility. I don't think it's been limited to the automotive. The reason the automotive is what has been requested is that those are the businesses that have shown an interest. She hasn't been able to find someone who wants to do a tax service. And I don't disagree with the chairman that that would be a potential, but she hasn't found anyone that was interested in it. And like I said earlier, she was in the automotive and the sales business herself. She's had people a number of times approach her for that. Yeah, and that it was actually what she's familiar with and what the neighborhood's been familiar with. And so that's what's happened. I don't think, and I apologize, I don't have the advertisement that she's used.
Sure.
But she hasn't tried to limit it. It's just who has approached her. And that's why we're asking to have that.
Right.
She does have a number of businesses that would readily use it for the light mechanical.
Yeah.
She just has not had anybody say, yes, I'd be interested to open up that small accounting office.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. And Mr. Blessum, I don't want to kind of continue to circulate on this, but in trying to look for potential tenants for other retail uses, does she have a commercial real estate agent that is helping list the property or reaching out? Are there sufficient signs on the property that says for lease, for rent, for retail or office space? Is there anything that would make it obvious that this place is available for those kinds of options?
She has in the past put up for rent signs. And I'm not sure what the status is now because I haven't been by for the last couple of months myself to look. I think there was a little concern about continuing with a for rent. I think there's some restrictions that you can't do that very long, or maybe it's just a business interest. And to answer your first question, she does not or has not discussed this with any commercial realtors as to potential either sale or lease.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, board members, anybody else have any other questions for Mr. Blessum? Okay, seeing none. Well, sir, we'll check back with you in a minute. So what we'll do here now for the next portion of the hearing, if anybody wishes to speak in support of the applicant's request for this requested use, they can have up to 5 minutes to present their comments. We'd first need to have them hit the raise hand icon in Zoom or hit *9 on their phone. And then we can have staff look to recognize them. So Bert, you see any hands up?
No, I do not see any.
Okay. All right. Related to that, is there anybody who wishes to speak in opposition to the request for the use to allow the vehicle maintenance and minor repair? Anybody that wishes to speak in opposition? Same signs of raise hand in Zoom or *9 on your phone.
Again, I'm not seeing any.
Okay. And finally, for the public in the audience, if there's anybody that has a comment related to the issue, maybe they're not for it, maybe they're not against it. We call it, does anybody want to make any comments that would be kind of in neutrality on this issue? Same signs. Okay.
Not seeing any.
Assuming we see none. Okay. All right. So board members, do we have any further questions for city staff?
Chair, members of the board.
Oh, yes. Ms. Donovan, go ahead.
Chair, members
My
of the board,
apologies.
this is Sue Ann Donovan, the zoning enforcement officer for the city of Des Moines. This is the fourth time that this property has come in, either through rezoning or to the Board of Adjustment to allow auto sales or minor repair. Nothing has changed over the years. Nothing has changed on the property or the condition of the property that would lead me to believe that that is a good change to allow a vehicle repair shop on this property. It's very small. We'll run into enforcement on storage of vehicles that are in need of repair. There's really limited space to store them. It just doesn't fit what this property should be used for. It probably does get a lot of attention for vehicle uses because it is set up that way, and so people probably naturally think of it as that's what the use would be in that property, but it doesn't fit the character of the neighborhood. It's not an asset to the neighborhood as a repair shop. It would be a detriment to the neighborhood. So I would respectfully ask the board to deny the use approval for a minor vehicle repair shop or any kind of sales or storage of vehicles. Thank you.
Okay. All right, board members, any questions for Sue Ann or staff? All right, seeing none. Mr. Blessum, you can have 3 minutes for a final closing if you would like to. That's up to you. If you feel you've said your piece, that's also fine. But do you have any closing thoughts?
I do, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, board members and staff as well. And I think our main thrust in this instance is the fact that everything all of the staff have indicated, Ms. Donovan lastly, is that this is set up for an auto use. It was, as the chairman pointed out, at one time was grandfathered in for a sales place for vehicles. It's just set up that way. There's two buildings. One's partially storage. One can be used for bays to use it for the use of auto repair, minor repair, not major. And we understand the concerns. And I think the real concern is how it will look in the neighborhood. And that's why we're asking to give us a chance, even a temporary variance, because it was, as the chairman pointed out, it was in fact a non-conforming use, and they lost it by not continuing the sales. For whatever reason, I wasn't, privy at the time. I wasn't counsel at the time to let them know that they needed to continue with that. A lot of times businesses just go through some changes, but it is in a prime location. And I think even though it's residential, and I understand the city's concerned that way, but even residential areas still need just your automotive small repairs. Not everybody has brand new vehicles. A lot of people have older models. And again, I hearken back to the fact that everyone that's recognized this area says it is structured for automotive. And so we're asking the city, the Board of Adjustment to grant us that variance to expand not the size of the structure of buildings, but the use of it, and show that it can be a good part of the neighborhood. And that's what we're requesting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we'll close the public portion, then go to board deliberation. So board members, any initial thoughts?
This is Marlis. I drive by this location often, and I would recommend the denial, just as staff would.
Do we have any other thoughts?
This is Lynn Carlson. I also drive by there, or not as probably as often as Mars, but I have. And as a car place, it just does not look attractive. And if the building is set to be set up for autos, that's not the concern here. The concern is that it's not appropriate for the zoning right now. And I do believe that a good faith effort has not been made to market this property to somebody else as maybe a small office or a coffee shop, which everybody always clamors for on the east side. So I also agree to go along with staff. I just don't think a car repair shop is appropriate for this location.
Mm-hmm.
This is Nathan. I don't think they met the variance test.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and folks, something that comes to mind here, when we talk about grandfathering, it's one of the most basic fundamentals in understanding how zoning ordinances not only work in current time, but their intent over time. So when a site is grandfathered in, that is not because, planning staff like to see the use or think that use is only commensurate for that property. Grandfathering means it was there first, but along with grandfathering, if the use discontinues for any notable length of time, and I think that's anywhere from 6 months to no more than a year in any ordinance, then that use expires. Grandfathering, your grandfather doesn't live forever. So I don't believe it was the intent of the past zoning ordinance or our current one that the idea was, yeah, this can only be used for automotive repair like it used to be. The use that it used to be wasn't deemed to be consistent with the intent of the zoning ordinance, let alone the actual zoning district that the site is in. I think this board has always understood that and tried to be semi-reasonable. First of all, no expansion of the use, which was denied by this board. But secondly, once the use had expired for more than 2.5 years, something tells you if this was such a great use, then why wasn't somebody in there all the time? So we eventually have to come back around to, there are uses that would be allowed on the property, certainly residential by zoning. This board gave reasonable exceptions to allow some reasonable uses consistent in a neighborhood setting. So again, this could be a bookstore, this could be an appliance store. I'm not going to go through a list of 100 ideas. The Board of Adjustment is not here to be a leasing and real estate planning consultant for property owners. We're here to look at the intent and the effect of the zoning ordinance and apply the conditions. So we're just going to keep chasing our tail here with this one, because the only thing that's been clear is what the zoning ordinance says and what the board has done in the past. As such, I see no reason to grant the requested use variance of the site. So staff's recommended denial. So I'm going to make a motion to deny the requested use variance. Would there be a second?
This is Marlis. I will second that.
All right, so we got a motion by Pins and a second by Marlis. So we'd be voting for denying the use variance. So if you're voting for denial, you'd say yes. I'll have Tyler take roll call.
Justin Gross,
Aye.
Marlis Jones,
Aye.
Cindy Smith,
Aye.
Nathan Blake,
Aye.
Lynn Carlson,
Aye.
Dave Garrett,
Aye.
and Mel Pins.
Aye.
The motion carries 7-0.
Okay, all right. Well, that'll bring us to our last item here. Item number 4 is a conditional use approval request at 1100 East Marion Street. I'll turn it over to staff for an introductory presentation on this item.
Mr. Chair, members of the Board, Catherine Drehas, planner for the city of Des Moines. This property was recently rezoned and is now coming before you to seek a conditional use approval for a group living not otherwise classified use in an NX2 district. This would allow up to 4 female residents on parole in the property, which is located west of Southeast 14th and south of East Watrous. You might, for a little bit of a landmark, you might recall that classic frozen custard is over on the corner with Southeast 14th. Excuse me.
Good landmark. Good landmark.
Thank you. I also find it to be a tasty landmark to recall. This property has we have a few photos that were taken during the rezoning process. So you'll see that they're a little bit before all of our snow this winter, just to give you a bit of a context. And as mentioned, this property was recently went through a rezoning process, which was approved by council in December, I believe. This history is included in your staff recommendation. We can refer back to it if necessary. Staff does feel that with the rezoning, this would be an appropriate use with conditions on the property. We have listed those conditions that are pretty standard, but 2 I'll call out specifically. And this is in accordance with the conditions that the rezoning was approved. Any group living use of the property shall be limited to the Freedom House group living use in form as described in the rezoning and in the conditional use applications, with no more than 4 female residents. Then we have a couple of pretty standard conditions to ensure that they comply with the various city ordinances. And then the other one I'll call out specifically is that the conditional use approval shall be subject to reconsideration by the Board of Adjustment if at any time the zoning enforcement officer determines that the facility has become detrimental to the surrounding neighborhood. We did receive a handful of cards and emails back. I've got these below, so we can go through these and come back as needed. Kind of a half and half of concerns about property conditions and then support. And then we also received an email without the signature. We're not able to place that on the consent map. If the board happens to have any questions for staff at this time, I'd be more than happy to try and answer.
All right.
Catherine, can you go back to those cards? I couldn't read the comments.
Yep.
It was so quick. So
Let me, sorry.
yeah, I want to read
Lynn.
the one the person says they're in favor.
Do you want me to zoom in?
No, this is perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
So Catherine, I've got a basic question for you here. So it looks like the property was rezoned through P&Z and the council back in December for use of the property for the Freedom House group living use.
That is correct.
So then why would this need to come in front of us? And thinking ahead, is that because any types of those applications just need reviewed by us to make sure they're going to be consistent with the intent of the ordinance?
I will
Sure.
do my best to make sure I answer that correctly, but then I think I might have Bert clarify.
Sure.
But the the rezoning from the N3A neighborhood district to the limited NX2 neighborhood allows, to a certain extent, the use of the group living, if I recall correctly, but it does then need the conditional use to allow the otherwise not specified.
Oh, all right,
I
because
think I might have Bert explain that
No,
a little.
yeah.
She's correct, but the reason it's put in the code as a conditional use is that gives the zoning enforcement officer extra powers to bring it back for reconsideration if it ever becomes a problem. So if it was a permitted use, then
Got it.
you're allowed
Got
by
it.
right.
Okay. All right, so for a very rough comparison, it's just like a tavern. A tavern could be allowed in a certain district, but it still requires a conditional use permit to make sure it's going to fit in with
Exactly.
the area around it.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Staff is recommending approval here, correct?
Correct,
Catherine?
with conditions.
Do you feel that there's sufficient off-street parking as might be needed?
You know, I might ask Bert to weigh in, but my understanding of the location is that, let's see, I don't know that there are restrictions on-street parking, but there is some additional with this apron,
Yeah.
off-street parking available on the property.
Right. So they have the attached garage and then room for a couple cars in their driveway.
Right.
I can let the applicant explain it, but most of the tenants don't have their own cars. A lot of them rely on transit, which is up on Watrous Avenue, just around the corner.
Yeah. Yeah, I just don't want to see any, I mean, we'll hear the testimony. I'm not sure what our decision would be, but I certainly don't want to see any expansion of parking in front yards or anything like that, or extra maneuvering in a front yard area beyond the minimum driveway width that's allowed. So,
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Catherine.
yeah, go ahead,
Thank you.
Justin.
Catherine, I know in looking at the responses from the neighborhood, there was a couple concerns about the exterior and safety and maintenance of the property. And I mean, I know it's not equivalent to like a rental property when you have like the inspection done by the city and rental, rental certificate. But is there a way that we can assure the neighborhood that this property will be well maintained?
I may defer your question to Bert.
Sure. And I think that falls under the final condition recommended by staff, that if this does become detrimental to the surrounding neighborhood, that the zoning officer can bring it back to the board.
Okay. Thank you, Bert.
Yeah.
So Bert, reasonable property care, if that's not being kept up, could be determined to be detrimental. Is that correct?
I think so.
Okay.
I'd defer to Sue Ann if that's one of the criteria that she would use, but
yeah, and we can talk to her in a few minutes on that. So Catherine, anything else you want to present? Are you good?
I am good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right. Well, let's go ahead and hear from the applicant, because I think if we have some further questions here in the short term, the applicant's presentation might help answer them. So applicant, you've got up to 10 minutes. Whoever's going to speak, we just need your complete name and address for the record. And we'll have staff recognize you. Hit the hand icon.
Or is it *9 for if you're on the phone?
Or
is that correct?
*9 if you're on the phone.
And we're not seeing any hands yet.
Okay, so whoever wants to, do we got one?
Maybe?
I
Try
can't.
this. Looks like we've got 515-402-6909 and let's see. I think they should be able to Bert or Tyler, I might ask for your assistance.
Yeah. Well, so of those that are participating by phone, if you want to speak on this item, if you're representing the applicant, if you are the applicant or maybe their legal representative, hit *9 on your phone at this time. *9 will allow us to recognize you. And staff, the little red phone, there we go. All right. So 515-402-6909 will recognize you. Now you have to hit *6 on your keypad, and that will unmute you. You had it. Do it again. *6. There we go.
Okay, here I am.
We hear you.
Okay, my name, okay, am I speaking to the same people that I spoke to in December?
No, you were at the Plan and Zoning
Oh.
Commission in December. This is the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Gotcha. Okay, I just didn't want to go back over everything that I've already said. Okay, so my name is Deb Sealer. I have, we have had the house as a Freedom House on Marion since 2001. And I can tell you, we have never had one complaint in those 20 years. The man that started the Freedom Houses died of pancreatic cancer in 2005. And I took over running the houses, which I now have 6 of them. And I run the house that we are talking about at 1100 East Marion now. And I just want you guys to know that the idea, I went to prison in 99 and I have 21 years sober. And I saw what it was like to come out of prison. And it's not nice. It's nothing nice. And places people go just puts them right back in the same environment that they were in when they first went to prison. So I decided then that I wanted to help people find a safe place to live, drug-free, which we are. And that's actually how I met you guys. I'll just tell you briefly, I removed a woman from my house when I caught her smoking meth on the property. And her boyfriend got very angry with me and turned me into every single entity in our city. And you guys are my last hurdle, per se. And I just want to thank you guys in December when I was able to, I had one of the girls on the line with me, and she spoke to that certain group of people. And I just want you guys to know how important it is for people to have a safe place to go that's drug-free, and that I also do not tolerate, I have a 0 tolerance for methamphetamine or anything like that. And I try to keep our neighborhood and our neighborhoods as safe and drug-free as possible by doing that. I have a very good relationship with the Department of Corrections, so that if one of the women starts struggling, I can immediately call their parole officer, which I always tell people, why won't you hire people on parole? They're the best people to have because they're being supervised. Where there lots of people on job sites are not being supervised, and don't know what people are doing when they're not at work. Anyway, I just had to throw that in. We work really hard at keeping our yard nice for the neighbors. The women mow the yard themselves. They shovel their snow. Like I said, we have never gotten a ticket for a snowy sidewalk or for the city to come to clean up debris or whatever. The women take pride in their home. That is their home. And most of the time the women are there at least a good year. So it's not something that people are coming in and out, going in and out all the time, constant changeover. It becomes their home. And we try to keep it that way. They'll decorate for the holidays, plant flowers in the garden outside by the front walkway. We just try to keep it as nice as we can, and we understand. And I always reiterate to the women that that's one of the rules of my house, is to be a good neighbor.
Okay. All right. Well, Deb, are you okay with taking a few questions?
Absolutely.
All right, board members, do you have any questions for Deb? I hear somebody shuffling. Are they prepping a question?
Mr. Chair, this is Cindy. I was just curious if Deb lives in this house or if it's just for other women.
No, I do not live in the house. It's for other women. I can just give you an idea on how bad we need houses like this. I've already had 3 calls from the parole office this morning trying to find placement for women who are struggling on the street on parole. And it's just, no, I do not take up a bed there. However, I do have a house over on 23rd Street, and my assistant lives at that house. So between the 2 of us, we're constantly making rounds. I make rounds every day to my houses. I have a head of house at every house that is comfortable giving me updates if somebody's struggling, if I need to come right away, whatever. So I watch over my houses very carefully.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions for
Thank
Deb? So Deb, I've got a couple quick questions for you. But first of all, I want to commend you on not only your own rehabilitation.
Thank you.
Yeah, because the idea is to return people to society to be productive. It sounds like you're being productive, and you're not only being productive, you're helping others, so that hopefully they don't have to learn from others' mistakes. They can move forward. So it sounds like you're a good counselor as well. But just a
Thank
couple questions for you. And we often
Okay.
find people who are in front of us asking for forgiveness rather than permission. So I'm assuming that for many years, if not decades, you probably would need to have requested a conditional use permit to have this operation, because you didn't have any previous zoning permission for this operation, did you?
No, I did not. And like I told him in December, I didn't even realize that I needed to do that. I pretty much
Sure.
inherited this house, and I just went on running it. After Carol
Right.
died, I had no idea that they,
Okay.
maybe I should say, had not gotten complete everything that they really needed to get before they opened the house.
Right. Well, and usually if there was a big problem at a location, there'd be complaints. So if the city didn't know about
Right.
it for a very, very long time, my second question, you talked about being neighborly. So I'm assuming that the neighbors know what you're doing there. They've been okay with it, at least to the best of your knowledge over time. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In fact, the man let's see, if you're standing looking out the front door to the left, he helps the women snow blow the driveway and stuff if the snow gets too much for them to handle.
Cool. Okay.
Or he'll start the mower or fix the mower or he's very, very supportive. And then the man on the other side is in the Army, and he too is very supportive of it.
Cool. Well, that's good to hear. Always good to have good neighbors. And Deb, I trust that while you care about this work, I'm assuming, do the women pay a rent fee or something to live there then?
Yes, they have to work, and they have
Okay.
to pay rent, and have to help clean the house. Absolutely, they do.
Okay,
Mhm.
so everybody's busy there because there's some pressure on them. They have to come up with the rent money, so they're just not sitting around there.
Absolutely not. You don't get through parole around. Sorry.
Excellent. And you don't have any excessive parking. You're not parking cars sideways in the front yard or anything like that, right?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to say out of the 4 women that live there now, 1 owns a car.
Yeah.
So yeah, they
Right.
a car is not one of the first things they need when they get out.
Right. Okay. All right. Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's all the questions I have, Deb. Anybody else have any questions for Deb?
Yeah,
On the
Mr.
board?
This is Justin. Deb,
Yes.
does Freedom House own other houses in Des Moines?
We don't own the houses, we lease the houses. So the only reason I am on this call and I've been taking care of this zoning issue, my landlord there is Laverne and Maxine Anderson. They're 87 years old. They both got COVID when all this zoning stuff came up. And so I've been communicating with Bert about the situation. They would not have been able to handle everything that I've needed to do to get through this. So they are our landlord. So if I have any trouble, I just call Laverne. I actually have Freedom Houses at 2 other of his houses as well.
Cool. Okay. All right. All right. Any other questions from the board?
I just have a comment, the concern about not being correct zoning or conditional use permit before, not knowing you needed one. But obviously, law enforcement officers were not concerned either if we have parole officers calling to place people there if they're not asking if they have the conditional use permit either. So it might be something of a gray area that people need to be educated on. about this, and the landlords probably need to take responsibility for that. But I'm glad you clarified the issue that not your ownership, but I think it's a great thing. I know several people who have gone through recovery, and it's a hard start. And so I'm glad they have a safe place to go with some rules, because they need their rules. They can't exist without them right away. So thank you for what you're doing.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, what we'll do here now, Deb, we'll see if there are other comments from the public, either pro or con on this issue. So we'll check back with
Okay.
you in a few minutes, all right?
Sounds good.
Okay, all right. Is there anybody present participating here in the audience that would like to speak in support of the applicant's request for this conditional use permit? So if somebody would like to speak in support of the request, please hit the raise hand function in Zoom, or if you're listening by phone, hit the star and then the number 9 to be recognized. So anybody wants to speak in support? Barking dogs don't count.
I'm
Let's
sorry.
see. It's part of the fun of Zoom. Okay, is there anybody that wishes to speak in opposition to the applicant's request? We'll do the same sign. Hit the raise hand function in Zoom or star 9 on your phone. Anybody that wishes to speak in opposition to potentially approving this conditional use request?
And I'm not seeing anyone, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And then just for
Mr.
looks
Chair,
like we have a
we've
hand
got
up.
a hand.
Okay, so the number area code 773, you're being recognized. So hit star 6 now on your phone, and that will, there you go. All right, we just need your name and address.
Hello, board. My name is Seth Miller. My address is 4018 Southeast 12th Street.
Right,
At
Seth?
the corner of Southeast 12th and Marion. So there is one lot separating myself and this house.
Gotcha. All right, you've got up to 5 minutes if you've got some comments you'd like to share with us.
Thank you. I believe in second chances, and I believe it's a good cause as to what's going on. I'm a brand new homeowner to this house. We moved in August, and it's needless to say, it was a complete surprise to me to get the letter in the mail for this meeting. I have noticed that the property isn't always maintained. There is snow on the sidewalks, maybe not enough to get a ticket, but I have concerns. I'm taking care of my elderly parents in this house. All my neighbors surrounding me are actually widowers. It's an older generation neighborhood. Just probably like the owners of the house who were too old to participate because they have COVID. I'm concerned with nobody that's not on parole is on staff. I couldn't find much, Mrs. Steeler, on your corporation, aside that it was run by volunteers. So I'm concerned with how tight a ship this is going to be run. How often is there drug testing? With 4 women in the neighborhood also brings potential for many more guests as well. So those are my concerns. Like I say, I believe in the cause, but I have safety concerns. It doesn't make me feel good that they've been operating without knowledge for a long time, but I'm glad to have knowledge of it now. The recidivism rate is about 30% from what I understand for parolees in Iowa right now. So statistically, more than one of those women each time is going to be a reoffender. So is it just meth that you don't allow? You said other drugs, but do you
All
trust
drugs.
the person that?
Okay. Seth,
that
if
runs
you
the
want
head
to
of
make some
household?
statements, you can make some statements, Seth, but you're not allowed to ask
No
questions. And Deb,
Okay.
you are not allowed to respond to questions from
Okay.
participants.
Okay.
I think I've said enough. So I just wanted to at least have my voice heard.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, Seth, thank you. We're pleased you've purchased a house here in Des Moines, and I think you'll find that it's generally speaking a good neighborhood. I think from what you've seen, you've noticed that so far. Okay, is there anybody else who wishes to speak in opposition to this item? Hit the Zoom raise hand icon or hit *9 on your phone to be recognized. And if there are no others, anybody that wants to speak in neutrality still has to be related to this specific item. If anybody would like to share some general comments that hasn't already spoken, same sign. All right, seeing none. Sue Ann Donovan, do you have any comments from the zoning enforcement officer?
Thank you, Chair and members of the board. I do have some comments. I think it's quite clear from the statements made by the person who operates this house that this is a correctional placement facility. Previously, I believe it has been classified or determined to be a group home, group residence, not otherwise categorized, which is treated differently under the zoning supplemental use regulations. This is clearly a correctional placement facility, and I believe this needs to be continued to be renoticed as such, and the staff recommendations need to come back with the supplemental use regulations that are applicable to a correctional placement facility.
Okay.
She stated it was correctional placement. We need to treat it as such.
So Sue Ann, is the testimony that's been provided by the applicant today and their reasoning or their use of the property, is that different than what was presented to you earlier in the application?
I always understood it to be a correctional placement facility. I think there was some question at the P&Z, although I did not attend that meeting, as to what exactly it was, and there was an indication that it wasn't correctional placement. Again, I wasn't there, but it's clear from today that this is a correctional placement facility. She said people go there on parole. She said parole officers are calling to find a place to house people on parole.
Okay.
I mean, it's clearly not been notified correctly and needs to come back before the board as a correctional placement facility.
Okay.
Am I
So
allowed
not
to
trying-
say anything?
Well, hold on a second, Deb. We'll come back to you. We're not going to leave you hanging. So Sue Ann, if you had those concerns, then when the application was first discussed before being put on the agenda, should that not have been reviewed? I'm not trying to be punitive here, but I'm just trying to figure out, it seems like we're almost out the gate here, and now we need to maybe pull this off and reevaluate.
I was talking to staff about it during staff recommendation meetings and was assured that she testified it was not correctional placement. It was group living, otherwise classified, not otherwise classified. I let it go. As of the testimony of today, I am convinced it's correctional placement facility, and we ought to review this under those standards and renotice it.
And if that happens, if we would delay this or it would need to be renoticed, there'd be no additional charge to the applicant for that, would there be?
No.
Okay. Okay. All right. Always something of interest at the Zoning Board of Adjustment. All right. Anything else you want to share at this time, Sue Ann?
No, that'll do it. I think we can have the discussion on whether correctional placement facility is appropriate at the next hearing.
Right. Okay. Okay. So questions for city staff from the board, which could include Sue Ann. So board members, it looks like there might be kind of a point of order here being noted by the city. But does the board have any questions for city staff, not just related to the application, but obviously what Sue Ann has just noted?
This is Lynn Carlson. I have a question. Can we, what are the differences in granting approval for correctional versus group home?
Yeah,
That's what I'm looking for.
it's a good question.
Chair, members of the board, we would have to look at separation from other facilities. There are other considerations like the square feet of the living space, sort of the calculation of usable living space and how many people could occupy it. it probably meets the lavatory and toilet per 10 residents. There's some dining and recreation square footage areas. And it has to provide supervision 24 hours a day by persons responsible for the care of the residents. So I think there's a higher level of responsibility for supervision under a correctional placement facility, and I believe they should meet that if that's what they're operating as, or not take parolees, not take people directly from prison that are placed there through their parole officer, and be a group living otherwise classified and not take parole occupants.
So Sue Ann, a question I've got, I'm trying to track with all of this. So group living other than parolees, well, like group living is just, hey, I've got a house for rent and it's a multi-family house. I rent out bedrooms. Is that what you're saying, that we could consider it if there weren't parolees, or is there some like post-prison release group living where they're not parolees?
I would say that if part of their parole is they have to live there and their parole officer has to know that they're there or know where they're at, that is a placement through the correctional placement. Okay. Now, if they're out of prison and they don't have any requirements to live in a sober house, that might be something different. But we also have sober living houses in the city that are not part of correctional placement.
Right.
That people choose to live there in order to have that environment. That would be group living, not otherwise classified.
Okay.
But if it's a correctional placement and people are being placed there as a term of parole, that's a correctional placement facility.
Right. I got you.
So,
all right. Any other questions for Sue Ann or staff?
Sue Ann, this is Lynn Carlson. So if the parole officer is just trying to help somebody because they know that this is a place that takes parolees, but not placing them there, is that then a group home, or is that the correctional thing, or is that what we need to do more investigation from finding out how people are being placed there?
yeah, I wouldn't mind a continuance to find that out, but I would say if a parole officer is calling saying, do you have a bed for this person? I can get them on parole if you have a bed for them, then that's probably correctional placement. They can't get out until they're housed somewhere and the parole officer is looking for it. Right. If I'm out of prison and I have I don't have to tie to anywhere and I'm just released from prison, then I can choose where I live, and that's not correctional placement. I think we have to be very careful that we understand exactly what the terms of the parole and occupancy are.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sue Ann, we've got a lot of people who come back into society on parole. So if I was on parole, but I got an apartment in a properly zoned apartment building, that's not considered correctional placement, is it?
Correct. I mean, if you're out of prison and you can choose where you live and just tell your parole officer that's where you're at, that would be one model of being on parole.
Right.
But if your parole is based on being placed somewhere through your parole officer, that's correctional placement.
Right. Yeah. So, and it's not only correctional placement, but in this case as well, it could be considered group living and what is generally defined as a single family neighborhood. Is that another related thing?
Yeah. Well, group living, not otherwise classified, they had to rezone from a regular neighborhood district to a zoning that allowed that. So this is not looked at as customary and incidental to a residential.
Got it.
Across the city. It's specific to where it can be placed.
Yeah.
I've got it.
When Catherine has the text highlighted, but when it was rezoned back in December to the limited NX2, it had the zoning condition that said any group living use to the property shall be limited to the Freedom House group living use and form as described in the rezoning application. And the group living use, that both the correctional placement and the use otherwise not classified that we have it on the agenda for. Both of those fall under that same category there.
Bert, I'm not arguing that. That's fine, but if Freedom House is a correctional placement facility, then they need to live up to the standards of the correctional placement facility.
Yeah.
Okay,
Am I allowed to say anything?
hang on, Deb. I will get to you in just a minute.
I think they misunderstood me though.
Okay, just hold on. Just hold on a minute.
Okay.
We take testimony. It's not a debate. We take testimony. So
Right.
the staff is saying what they're saying at this time. We'll give you a chance for closing here, which will be very, very shortly. All right,
Thank-
so board members, do we have any further questions for city staff or Sue Ann?
Well, this is Nathan. I just want to make sure I understand where's the separate definition that we would be considering this under if this does get continued?
It would be,
Nathan, it's going to be under section 134-3.3 B, 3.2B. There's a correctional placement residence definition that goes on for quite some length. And right now I'm just tossing around what I've heard in terms of the testimony, because I think there is a fact question that we are unclear where we fall on. And in order to determine that, it probably is not out of line to request a continuance or to seek the continuance, grant the continuance, so that we can determine that, because I'm not sure that it falls in correctional placement either, given the limitations of this definition, but what we've heard doesn't give us that information.
Okay.
Well, could we at least ask when I know that there's going to be a rebuttal here, but at the end of that, maybe based on your understanding of whatever the definitions and the categories are, maybe you could ask that question of the applicant to kind of determine. I mean, I guess I obviously, if we need to continue it, we should. If it is categorically misplaced right now, we should continue it. But if there's some open question which we can establish right now, we might as well just hear it, and it comes back the other way, and it does fit into the group home rather than the correctional facility, whatever category. Then I think we should try to do a little more work to make sure that we can figure that out and just handle it today if possible.
Right. Yeah, I think the vice chair has a good point. If this is something that staff really has to work through and do a lot of legal consultation on for the benefit of everyone, from the process, the proper process, and certainly for consideration of any applicant, we'd probably be best to defer this. But if it is something we can work through, I think the applicant's been very clear what they're doing and how they do it. If there's a way that we can work through that in today's hearing, I would be okay with that. Judy, do you want to add anything to that, or do you have any advice for the board? And we can certainly get to more of this in board deliberation, but just briefly on what Nathan referenced, can you help us there?
Well, thank you. This is Judy Parks Cruz, the legal counsel for the board. What I'm looking at in terms of definition talks about correctional placement in terms of specific types of status that the individual has. And there are 3 of them listed. And typically these would be something that would be documented in the correctional record of the individual. It is not the same as just someone who is placed on parole and then generally that is their status. These talk about being released to such facility. So it's a specific placement to this house. I'm not sure that we have documents that show that.
Well, yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is, yeah, so somebody leaves the Newton Correctional Facility in Jasper County and they're being sent to Fort Des Moines. That's a correctional facility, but they are being assigned to it by the court.
Right.
In a case like this is voluntary. Yeah, they're on parole, but the person's decided they want to be there. The prison system is not sending them there as part of carrying out their sentence or carrying out their rehabilitation. That
Correct.
person is choosing to go there.
Chair, I think that's the question we have to decide, and that is
Okay.
not clear to me.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I guess what's good about this is I think we can find a way through it, but it sounds like potentially in order to preserve everybody's interest here, and this does include the neighborhood, by the way, preserve the interest of the neighbors in the neighborhood. This might warrant some more intense thought by staff and their legal counsel beyond this agenda item today. But so since Nathan had a question, a statement there for staff, do we have anything else that staff or questions for staff from the board?
Hey, Bert, hey, Mel, this is Dave.
Yeah, Dave.
I may have missed something here, but based on what's highlighted on the screen right now, what was misunderstood? Because it clearly states in there what the application contained, and it's specific to the Freedom House.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't.
Well, what we're reading there is what staff wrote as original prose here. This is not the code. This is a staff report. So
Well,
I think city staff has to go back through the intent of the ordinance, and either tie up those loose ends or clarify what a facility is or assignment to a correctional facility.
And I'll step back and take a little bit, give you a little more history on this. When it was
Sure.
being rezoned, we had notified it as the correctional placement residence, and staff had recommended denial of the rezoning. However, during the public hearing at the Plan and Zoning Commission, the evidence or the testimony that Deb Thieler had provided to the commission convinced the commission that it wasn't a true correctional placement facility, and that's why they went against the staff recommendation and recommended approval. But with this condition that's highlighted here that says any group living use of the property shall be limited to the Freedom House group living use in form as described in the rezoning application. And then right below that, this was what was taken from the application that says the Freedom House is a women's house for those on parole and for those who desire a clean and sober life.
Well,
So
yeah.
Bert, are you saying that the language is clear and the staff
Well-
rationale is clear and your recommendation is clear to grant approval?
Well, that was, I have to defer to Sue on that, but when we put it on the agenda, we weren't considering it to be the correctional placement facility, but in Deb's testimony today, there was something that tipped Sue off to convince her otherwise, which
Well,
I guess we need to hear from Deb then.
Yeah,
Just
I'd
to
like to hear from Deb because,
that up.
Deb is speaking honestly and from the heart. Deb is not trying to quote regulations or give a definition probably in the terms that staff is used to. Deb's not trying to interpret the zoning ordinance. Deb's trying to tell us what she does.
Right.
So,
Mel?
so I think board members, yeah, do you have other questions for staff? We will have a board deliberation here yet today. So do you have any questions for staff?
No, I'll wait.
Okay.
Okay, this is Lynn Carlson. I got a comment, and maybe to answer Dave's question, for me, it seems like it's a correctional house. If they are told by their parole officer that they need to live in this place and the parole officer places them. It's a group living if it's a person who happens to be on parole and finds the house and says, these are my people that I want to live with who will support me. So I think it's different if it's a voluntary or if it's a mandatory and who's telling them to live there.
Right. Well, that is maybe a good segue so that we can have the appellant wrap this up for us with a 3-minute closing. And so I'd like to go ahead and do that at this time. So Deb, it appears, is this a correctional placement facility or is this a voluntary place where people come and live? They have to tell their parole officer where they're going to go live, but can you bring us around to explain this in a little more detail? Keep in mind the concerns or questions you've heard from staff.
Yes, I'll do my best. Okay, first of all, I would always like to offer to bring a panel of my men and women to the city to help. I know there's tons of houses like mine around here. First of all, the women, everybody that's getting out of prison is on parole. Everybody.
Right.
So unless you're discharging and you're done with your sentence. But pretty much as far as I, as a neighbor, and want to know who lives in my neighborhood, pretty much everybody coming out is going to get a parole except for the people in life, for life. Okay, so anyway, the Fort Des Moines, the women's work release, all the work releases in the different counties in Iowa are correctional placements. They are ran by correctional staff. That's what makes the difference. Now, myself, Kingdom Living, I could name you almost all of the houses in Des Moines because we all work together to try to make it the best for everybody. But all of us, the people that come to us, want to come to us.
Right.
So they don't say, I mean, I get calls from women in prison. How soon do you think you'll have an open bed? Well, my wait's like 4 to 6 months.
Right.
But these women are not being sent to a correctional facility. They are low risk enough that the correctional facilities, and we need to really think about being grateful for that, where the high risk offenders go, where the correctional staff is. And I think I really didn't say at the beginning of this today, like I did in December. I take people who aren't on parole. You don't have to be on paper to come to my sober living house.
Sure.
I have, at my 23rd Street house, I have 7 women there, and half of them are not on parole.
So you might take somebody in who's homeless or abused or something like that.
I would take somebody who can't stop doing heroin and just got done detoxing, and if they go back to their family, they'll be high that night, or they might die.
Okay.
And it's bad out there, you guys. It's bad out there. The drugs in our town. And I can only say this one more time. I take any women or men that want to live a sober, right living life.
Okay.
And you won't believe how many of them can't go to their families. The parole board might say, hey, you don't have to go to the Fort Des Moines. You don't have to go to the work release. See, do you have a family member you could go to? Because they don't want to use up my beds either, because there's people on the street that need to come. But you wouldn't believe how many people don't even have one sober family member.
Okay.
And like I said, I would offer a panel of these people. I had one of my girls speak at the last December meeting, and I think that's probably the most powerful to you guys. And I can tell that I probably am not going to be the last. I'm probably not going to be the first that is here today doing what I do. But like I said, there's lots of other group homes in Des Moines that run the same way I do. And you have to agree to my rules to come to me.
Right.
So, if you want to go run amok from 10 o'clock at night to 6 in the morning, you can't come to my house.
Right.
And that's not per your PO. That's per me.
Right.
So
Deb,
I hope.
Just a question. So the Department of Corrections, they don't inspect your place. They don't have rules for it. You don't have to follow any process that they have. The parole officer just wants an address of where this person lives and can normally be found. Is that right?
Yes. However, I can always be in contact with the PO. They can come and check to make sure their person is there. Anytime they're welcome.
Right.
They can come and
but
just
that's
see
your
my
own
house.
process. That is so you aren't permitted, endorsed, or following some guidelines from Department of Corrections as a correctional placement facility. You're not.
Absolutely not. Nope.
Okay.
My rules are my rules, and they're different, and the POs know my rules.
Got it. All right. Board members, as a courtesy to you, do you have any final questions you'd like to ask Deb? If not, we're going to close the public hearing and we'll discuss a little. Okay. All right, Deb.
Thank you.
All right. Hang tight here. All right. We'll close the public portion. We'll go to board deliberation. So, all right, my smart fellow board members, let's think through this. If for the purpose of legality, this is a little too confusing, it might warrant us to put this off and defer this for the benefit of the applicant as well. If we think we understand where staff's concerns were, but yet we feel we've addressed that with testimony and our questions, then maybe we can make a decision. So what do you guys think?
I was going to jump in, but you said you're smart, fellow board members, so I'll defer to others.
There are 6 of you. You're all of good thought.
Hey, Bert, I'm still questioning where all of a sudden there's been a change in I guess the initial recommendation by staff.
Right.
It's been pretty thoroughly discussed with P&Z and with the council.
Yeah.
If I read,
Yeah, see, our definition of correctional placement residence, the first part of it says, I guess I can read it to you. It says a correctional placement residence is a group living use occupied by 3 or more persons who have been convicted of public offenses and who have been released to such facility. And
so,
I think the fact that they're not released directly to this facility was why it had been put on the agenda as a group living not otherwise categorized. But Sue raised some valid points today that maybe the testimony, we weren't getting the whole picture.
but are they released to this facility, or they choose to come here because they can follow her rules?
Well, the way that it's been worded on the notifications is the group living not otherwise categorized. So if the board would grant that today, that's what they would be approved for. So if it was ever discovered that these people are actually being released to this facility, then that'd be a clear zoning violation. But I think Sue's wanting to avoid having to do that enforcement. She'd rather take a step back now, just make sure the board's decision is the right one, and then she wouldn't have to do the enforcement on the back end.
Well, on the flip side of that, though, why don't we just allow it right now? And if it is the case through some legalities that it seems like it's actually required, although I will say from my perspective, it doesn't seem like it hits that. But if it requires some other conditional use permit, then staff can bring it back next month.
Right.
And instead of continuing it, we can,
Yeah.
she can have 2 conditional use permits.
Right. But that would require her to file a new application and repay the $300 fee.
Well, I'm not recommending it because I actually think based on her description and what you just read of the requirement for correctional use facilities, it may not be the case. As she said, it may not be the case that there are 3 or more people there that have been, that are on parole, right? It could be 0, or it could be 1.
Yeah.
And it would still be a group home living spot.
Yeah.
I agree with that, but she also operates other facilities like this around town. Is that correct?
She's never provided the addresses, but she's
Right.
stated that, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, I don't know. I think we're trying to read way too much into this based on what I agree a little bit with Nathan's saying. I'll let everybody else comment.
Dave, I agree with you on that we're reading too much because she mentioned that she has people living in her places who are not on parole specifically. And the whole thing lies down to is, are they placed there by the POs? Not just the POs can check there, but who places them there? And if people are calling from prison looking for a house, it's not the PO doing that. That's the person who is being released. So I am inclined to go ahead and go with staff recommendation today, because I believe when we do the further research, we're going to see it's not a correctional facility. I think it was a trigger word.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm on Lynn's train of thought. I live within a half-mile and one property owner distant away from the 5th Judicial District near the Blank Golf Course and Fort Des Moines Zoo. That's being released to a correctional facility. You actually are assigned to go there. It's not a choice. This is a choice. All the parole officer wants is, where are you living, so I can find you to make sure you're not running out of state, or you're doing what you're supposed to. So without belaboring this, fellow board members, we can have more discussion. And Judy, since you are our advisor, if there's a motion we might make that is so far off the rails, it's not even within legal confines, please let us know.
I'll be
But as
happy
far as
to.
further debate, I'd want to have my board members decide. Do we want to defer this to next month to see if there's clarifications needed? Or do we feel that with the testimony that was presented by the applicant, the questions we had, and certainly as well as testimony and concerns from those in the neighborhood, do we have what we need to decide if a conditional use permit is warranted here for this group living? And if so, we can have a discussion or make a motion on that.
This is Lynn. I'm going to go ahead and move staff recommendation of allowing this with the conditions that were listed in the staff recommendations. I believe there's 5 of them there.
I'll second. It's Nathan.
Okay. All right. So we've got a motion by Lynn and a second by Nathan to approve the requested conditional use permit subject to the conditions presented. So if there's no further discussion on that, then all that would be in favor of granting the requested conditional use, we'll take roll call, and aye for approval.
Marlis Jones,
Aye.
Cindy Smith,
Aye.
Nathan Blake,
Aye.
Lynn Carlson,
Aye.
Dave Gare,
Aye.
Justin Gross,
Aye.
and Mel Pins.
Aye.
That motion carries 7-0.
Okay, so Deb, we have approved what we had in front of us today, but I would encourage you to sit down and talk with city staff about your operation further. Provide any documentation you might need to help them understand other things you may want to do in the future. And while this hearing is about this address, if you've got some other operations in the city of Des Moines, it might behoove you to discuss it sooner rather than later. But I'll just leave you with that advice.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you're very welcome. All right, so that concludes agenda item number 4. So board members, we just got a few minor items of business. One is to approve minutes from last month's meeting. I think 6 of 7 of us were here. So if anybody has any corrections, state those. If not, there'd be a motion for approval. Let's hear it.
I'll move
This
to
is
approve.
Marlis. I'll second that.
There we go. Motion by Smith, second by Jones. All in favor of approving the minutes. If you were here last month, we'll take roll call. That's everybody for Nathan.
Nathan Blake,
Abstain.
Lynn Carlson,
Aye.
Dave Gare,
Aye.
Justin Gross,
Aye.
Marlis Jones,
Aye.
Cindy Smith,
Aye.
and Mel Pins.
Aye.
The motion carries 6-0-1.
Okay, thank you. All right, now board members, I think you saw a note, I think maybe Bert and or Judy had sent out as a follow-up to our discussion related to the, I can't remember the name of the actual location there, but our place on Euclid Avenue by the Des Moines River, where we wanted to grant some signage for Joppa. Both Bert and Judy worked with me and helped develop language for a letter to ask the city to reconsider allowances for some signage within a flood district, because right now it wouldn't allow for any on a pre-existing building. So, and Bert or Judy, if you want to add anything to this, this went to council and then they do what with it?
Throw it in the trash?
No, I just think that this is Judy Parks Cruz. No, they do not throw it in the trash. They actually consider that there was a consideration of it at the February 8th council meeting, and they then refer it back to staff to determine exactly the parameters of any kind of amendment that would be proposed. There will probably be a number of amendments to the newly enacted 134, 135 taking place probably around mid-year of this year, and this will be included among those. So they favorably consider, getting this kind of feedback so that they can get it in the chain of events to get it actually written into code.
Okay, yeah. We did this a few years ago. A few of you were on the board at that time, but it was the Zoning Board of Adjustment that said, hey, city, we'd love to see an ordinance that says no more pole signs for new development, and also to, in essence, eliminate old pole signs if they're no longer in use. And that wound up getting put in the city code and updated a couple times, and is still reflected in our new ordinance. So it gives us a chance when we see things on a continual basis that might need tweaking or adjustment. Just as a citizen, as I say in the preamble, citizens can ask the city to change the regulations. So can we. So I think that was a nice bit of homework on our part. This issue will probably rarely come up, but it might help us avoid having some of these in the future when they're really minor considerations. So I want to thank you for your work on that from staff, as well as my colleagues. Okay, Bert, anything else we need to do? Are we good?
The only thing I was going to mention was that likely on the April Board of Adjustment agenda, in addition to the annual election of officers, we'll also have a item to approve any proposed amendments to the bylaws. So I had sent the bylaws out about a month ago with the workshop. So if anybody has any suggested changes or edits to those, feel free to send them my way. But at this point, I'm shooting for the April meeting to approve any revisions.
And did those bylaws have some suggested revisions from staff, or is it the same slate as it was?
I don't remember which version. I have the version that's currently on the books, and I also have a version where I've highlighted the stuff I think should be changed. I don't remember which version I sent out.
Okay. All right. Yep. Well, board members, I'd encourage you to read through that for April, and then
And I'll send it out when it gets closer.
Oh yeah, cool. And so we'll have 2 elected board positions up. We have vice chair and chair. I would anticipate that this could be a very large and expensive campaign for candidates. So I look forward to everybody be present for next month so we can have a good discussion and vote on these important issues. So,
Chair, I got a general question for staff, if I could just ask.
Sure.
At one point, accessory dwelling units were kind of something that was going to be in the purview of the board, and yet I haven't seen anything come up. Is there an update on that? Is it still being kind of worked out among language?
Or is it allowed by right now in certain districts?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of your question. Justin, what was the topic?
The topic was accessory dwelling units.
Oh.
And I know at one point we were going to be kind of in charge of overseeing.
Well, are you thinking of the short-term commercial rentals like the Airbnbs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the short-term commercial rentals and Airbnbs, I think Sue knows the most current status, but right now it's on the books as though those would require a conditional use permit from the Board of Adjustment. But last summer, the state legislature passed some legislation that stripped the city of any ability to regulate those.
Okay.
So at this point,
Wow.
it's like we're only going to require housing rental certificates and not a conditional use permit. So,
Oh,
so
wow.
you're right. We were expecting a huge onslaught of those, and it's looking like that's not going to happen now.
Okay, great. Thanks for the update.
Sure.
AHUs are in the code and are generally allowed. They might have some things that would maybe go to the board. As long as they have the right zoning, I think that it's more of a matter of chapter 135.
He was asking about the short-term rentals more than the accessory dwelling units.
Yeah, the little grandma's cottages on a existing property like in Sherman Hill. You've addressed that now in the zoning ordinance for certain.
Right.
amounts of those,
Right. Any zoning district that allows 2 or more dwelling units on a parcel allows an accessory dwelling unit by right. It wouldn't require a conditional use approval from the Board of Adjustment.
Got it.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. But Justin, good question all the way around. Yeah, that's one we've been busy enough with taverns and cell phone towers. I haven't thought about our VRBO Airbnb stuff. So, okay. All right. Well, if nobody has anything else, I appreciate everybody's attention and commitment. So thank you all, and we'll see you next month.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
This hearing is officially adjourned.